here. So let's take a hand on the left. Anybody? Any critical mindset question that you would want us to address? Yes, please.
So what is this?
Hi. I'm very much interested to understand what are the tools and techniques that you can use to actually measure the entrepreneurial success on a global scale. I want to know, we have so many initiatives, entrepreneurial initiatives happening, right? And part of the assembly that was conducted yesterday, people came up with such amazing ideas. We can implement those, but how can I measure the success of each of these initiatives if I implement it? What are the tools and techniques that could be used?
Tools and techniques for measurement. All right, now we're going to go to this side of the room, and that's you, sir.
I can't.
Yes. And the mic is coming to you in speedingly fashion.
All right, thank you very much. So staying with the theme of this session, I'd like to know how can we prepare young people for becoming successful entrepreneurs? What is it takes to create a successful young person that has enterprising attitudes and abilities and mindsets so that he or she, when they leave school, how can we get a hold of young people while they're still in their formative years? And when they leave school, that we can ensure that when they go into labor markets where formal employment opportunities are scarce, how can they become job creators and not job seekers?
Preparing young people, and we got the perfect panel member to address that. And then one last question on the left-hand side of the room, and that would be the lady over there.
Hello, this is Khansa from Sudan. I really want to understand how the understanding of mindset can release the motivation of people to do things and to accomplish their goals.
So
I mean, the relationship with mindset and
motivation.
Yes.
All right, so there's a very good start. Certainly you're in the right session. Let's quickly get a quick survey. Who here are entrepreneurs? All right, that's 10% of the room. Who are capacity providers? Entrepreneurship capacity providers. Okay, that's another 10, 15%. And then the rest of you are here for interest sake. All right, but that's exactly the start of our entrepreneurial mindset, is to explore and to try different and new things. Let me kick off by introducing you to the panel members. On my right-hand side, we have Emmanuel. Emmanuel, quick introduction. Why are you here?
I've been involved with Allan Gray Orbis Foundation on a project over the last 6 months, particularly looking at entrepreneurial mindsets, and I want to share an overview of it, what it means through the last 100 years, and what you can understand of entrepreneurial mindset going forward.
Seelam Lee from the Korea Entrepreneurship Foundation.
Hi, my name is Celine from Korea Entrepreneurship Foundation. I'm here because we want to share what we do in terms of entrepreneurship education, because we have been doing the entrepreneurship education for the young people especially, but we want to expand the young entrepreneurship education, especially mindset, to wide range of people, not only the young people. So, and we've been doing this for 5 to 6 years. So, we have to think of the measurement or evaluation seriously. So, we want to get some tips from other panels and some audiences from you. So that's why I'm here. So please ask me if you have any questions about the Korean entrepreneurship.
I'm Kelly Shaver, and for those of you who are not in the most recent session, I have the privilege of, I have the privilege of helping the Allan Gray Orbis Foundation with their Entrepreneurial Mindset project.
I think I have a microphone. Does it work?
Yes.
No? Yeah. My name is Johannes Lindner. I'm from Austria. I have 3 hats on my... the first one is I'm the head of the Department for Entrepreneurship Education. No.
Not working.
Doesn't work. Okay. My name is Johannes Lindner. I'm from Vienna, from Austria. I have 3 hats on my... the first one is I'm the head of the Department for Entrepreneurship Education at the University Teacher College. We are doing research, and the largest field research in whole Europe at the moment with 60,000 participants. The second one, I'm the Federal Coordinator of Entrepreneurship Education on behalf of the Austrian Ministry of Education. And we have a project association where we are developing a lot of different entrepreneurship education learning tools for primary education up to upper secondary 2 education and also for university teachers. Yeah, that's me.
Thank you, Johannes. So hopefully that will give you some confidence that we got the right skill and competence up on the stage to address some of the questions that already came from the audience, tools and techniques and measurement. Selim sort of expressed her interest in the very same field. How do we prepare young people? Johannes, who's been spending his entire career in entrepreneurial education. And then, of course, using entrepreneurial mindset to accomplish goals, which is really exactly what it's about. It's mindset. And entrepreneurial mindset doesn't really necessarily mean I need to be an entrepreneur to have an entrepreneurial mindset or I have to own a business. It's generally reference to a way of thinking that's opportunistic in its approach, holistic, and at the same time lead us a balance for the purpose of value creation. And whether this is cultural value, social value, or economic value. The value creation part is what's most important. So we're going to kick off by very briefly giving you a bit of context in terms of how did we arrive here and why is this important? Why is it that not only the foundation have decided to invest in this project, but at the same time, why is it a high priority item on the GERN agenda? We were fortunate enough last year to be hosted in Daegu in Korea, where this was a GERN agenda item in terms of how do we understand entrepreneurial mindset? How can we arrive at a point where we'll be able to measure this? And before that, first of all, the important part was to define it in a general sense that makes sense for not only the research community, but also makes sense for people on the ground, for entrepreneurship practitioners, for capacity developers, and then, of course, for entrepreneurs themselves. And early on in Kelly's session, you've had some references and questions from how is this different whether I'm in corporate, how is this different if I'm in high-impact entrepreneurship, or whether I'm running an informal business in an informal settlement. And it's certainly not about the action, but it's about the application of the action, and then, of course, about the value creation. So we're going to kick off with Emmanuel, who's going to take us through a very brief presentation. He's not going to cover all the slides, so we can also obviously make up the time. But the piece he's going to really focus on is sort of the evolution of mindset out of the field of psychology over the 100 years that he's just mentioned. He's not going to take 100 years to cover that. I'm fairly certain of that. And shortly after that, we're going to try and address some of these questions through general conversation by drawing on some of the expertise we have on the stage. And then we're going to continue with that interactive nature of the session to ensure that you get as much value from the diverse set of skills and competencies we've got on the stage. Are we all in agreement with that? Happy with that approach? Lovely. Here we go. We're going to kick off then, Emmanuel. Over to you.
So I'm really excited to take you on a whirlwind tour in the understanding of entrepreneurial mindset, where it came from and where it is right now. And hopefully that will spark some other questions for you that we can bring into the discussion over and above what you've already put forward. For those who might want to get access to these slides, you can search on Twitter, hashtag AGOF for Allan Gray Orbis Foundation, hashtag AGOF Mindset, all one word. And you'll have access to a link for these slides later if you want to go through the detail, because I'll have to touch on some aspects instead of going into all of the detail. So firstly, understanding entrepreneurial mindset. Well, what is it? Who has defined it? Well, many people have offered definitions. One of the most often cited definition, and just getting the clicker working. Okay. No, there we go. Yes, there we go. Is by Allan from INSEAD, and he said that entrepreneurial mindset is a specific state of mind which orientates human conduct toward entrepreneurial activities and outcomes. The challenge with that definition is a specific state of mind could be interpreted in 1,000 different ways. So what do we mean by that? What does that mean? So that human conduct is orientated toward entrepreneurial activities and outcomes. So that brings us into, well, let's understand mindset a little bit more. Let's dive into that and look at that through a bit of a journey. So in 2006, the person who really coined the word mindset, Carol Dweck, in her paper with Malden, said that it is the view you adopt of both yourself and others, and it has a profound impact on your life and the decisions that you make. Another definition, which I really like, and I'm going to dwell on this definition in conversation as I go ahead, is it's the internal lens through which you navigate life, with this lens influencing everything that you see and do. So what lenses do we wear that help us to see ourselves in a specific way and see others in a specific way? And when it's entrepreneurial mindset, how do those lenses either help entrepreneurial activity or prohibit or stop it from happening? So another quick way to look at it is just to look a little bit. Very basic. This isn't theory. This is just a basic way of human ability. Let's look at the brain. Let's look at how we function. Simply put, we're made up of who am I? Okay, it's the core of who we are. It's made up of personality. It's made up of values, attitudes, learned behavior, a range of internal aspects of who am I. Then there's aspects of what do I know. There's aspects also of what have I done and what am I capable of doing. What do I have competency to do? In a sense, that's a very simple view of us as human beings. Now looking at mindset, it's kind of, if those were lenses, what lenses do the who am I, what lenses do we interact with what we've done, what we know, and what we're capable of? How do we see ourselves? How do we experience these different activities of our humanity in a specific way? And what's the best lens for that to happen, for entrepreneurial activity to emerge on the other end? And that's really what we want to go through. So there's the timeline from the 20s, and there was research beforehand, right up until now, and quick whirlwind tour commencing. So the first part is one of the founders, and where entrepreneurial mindset really came from was personality psychology. And Gordon Allport was one of the founders and the forerunners in that research after Freud and the founders of psychology before him. And he really said that personality is a dynamic organization within an individual of psychophysical systems that determine one's unique adjustment to the environment. Simply put, how we interact with our environment and some aspects that we're born with that are linked to that. He then defined 4,500 attributes of personality. So I'm not going to go through those 4,500 right now, but he started a thing called trait theory. One of the aspects of trait theory is he said there's an aspect called phenotypes and genotypes. Internal and external forces have an influence on an individual's behavior. Now, we just spoke about lenses, internal ones, and how we view external. So in a sense, he's speaking mindset before we even spoke about what it actually is or came up with the word. So he then, a guy called Fisk in 1949, took the 4,500 and came up with 22 through clustering and working with it. And then he used a process that Kelly will speak a bit more later called factor analysis to bring that down to 5. And those 5 were conformity, emotional control, being socially adaptable, having an inquiring intellect, and having confident self-expression. That then was further researched, and in the 70s, what's commonly referred to as the Big 5 came up as the key summary of what personality is really made up of. So, as I said, I can't cover everything, but research happened. Specifically looking at entrepreneurs now, not just looking at people in general. Since the 1848, that entrepreneurs are risk-bearing, right the way through to 78. And I'll touch on these, and again, you've got access to the slides of characteristics of entrepreneurs. Some of them will have an impact on the mindset that you have. In the 80s, it moved beyond personality psychology. It said, maybe it's not just personality, there's more. And cognitive and social psychology was emerging. Cognitive psychology really about how we think and how that impacts our perception, memory, problem-solving, language, human intelligence. And social psychology is how do our thoughts, feelings, and attitudes impact how we relate with one another and the assumptions we have about each other. And they then took this, and some key theories came out, which are very popular today still. The theory of planned behavior, Another one called social cognitive theory by Bandura, and he also brought out self-efficacy, and we will be speaking later about entrepreneurial self-efficacy right from the 80s. And then already implicit theories by Dweck again as to what are those theories we come up with about ourselves and others, and how does it impact how we work with the world. Again, lots of other theories that we've looked at that builds up part of the project that we're working on at the moment. So that goes into further challenges in the next decade. An interesting one, and I'm not going to touch, so continual research happened, but an interesting one to touch on is by Cunningham and Lescheron in 1991, and they highlighted these areas as core to entrepreneurial behavior. The challenge is that they looked at schools of business globally, and none of them were focusing on those areas in order to develop entrepreneurs. So they actually then thought, well, there's a big disconnect between education for entrepreneurs, and they put forward what they called psychological characteristic school of entrepreneurship, and saying, well, how do we include drives, beliefs, attitudes, needs, values? How do we include that in entrepreneurial education? And they were one of the forerunners of that thinking. The next decade and the recent decade, more research happened, and this is an extensive research list, but there are, I'm sure, some places that we've missed. These were the big contributions, but in this, I wanted to touch on one of the biggest drivers of mindset, and that's Carol Dweck's work, along with Malden, to actually take what she started off in the 80s of implicit theory, and she called it mindset. And she then said, well, there's two core mindsets, a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And a fixed mindset really just looks at that all the attributes of how these lenses is fixed in concrete and nothing changes. And a growth mindset is actually everything's malleable, everything's changeable. And what lens do we see the world and ourselves through? And that lens impacts on how we deal with challenges, how we deal with obstacles. What is our view on actually putting in effort when it really gets tough? What is our view on getting criticism and dealing with failure? And how do we celebrate or get offended by the success of others? And a lot of work has been done on this. And just keep this in mind, because a lot of this does underpin a lot of the theories that come forward in entrepreneurial mindset too. In 2004, Barron asked some questions, which I think are great ones. Why do some people become entrepreneurs? Why do some people recognize opportunities more than others? And why are some entrepreneurs more successful than others? And this started a big process of not just looking at business theory, but looking into the behavioral sciences for answers. So his answers were all from the behavioral sciences. Perceptions of risk, prospect theories, signal detection theories, theories from years back that he started seeing as valuable ways to understand why entrepreneurs behave differently to non-entrepreneurs. A big driver for this is Sarasvati. She came up with effectuation. Now, effectuation, I'm going to spend a minute on it, but you can go back to the slides otherwise. It's really helpful. It's really looking at causal reasoning versus effectual reasoning. As an example, one aspect that you spoke about, if you're given a given means M, imagining possible new endings using a given set of means. So I've given this bunch of M's, and I'm imagining that it's going to end up getting to certain outcomes. Or I'm given a bunch of M's or ingredients, and I'm imagining one outcome. One of effectuation is if you're given resources, if you're able to think of many outcomes, it changes things, and that's one of the effectuation aspects. But she looks at this for affordable loss and risk. How do we look at affordable loss differently? How do we look at leveraging contingencies differently? How do we look at building partnerships? So instead of competition, we look at strategic partnerships. How do we focus on control rather than uncertainty? How do we think about the future differently? Very high-level approach that I'm giving, but there's a lot of value that she's offered. At the same time, Duckworth, she offered in 2007, started her work on grit, and it's really two components. It's perseverance and passion over the long term, and how that drives entrepreneurs. And that is my time, but I'm just going to finish off briefly. From that, there was just a rise in studies in recent years. The last 7 years, a lot of studies that included entrepreneurial self-efficacy, remembering that that's from the 80s, based on self-efficacy, as well as entrepreneurial intention, and some recent research from one of them being linked to Kaufman, Rob, and Valeria with the World Bank study, and those you can read up on, you can look at the papers. highlighting specific drivers that link to entrepreneurial mindset. One of the most recent ones from 2014 is the Entrepreneurial Mindset Profile, and it was developed by contributors from Eckerd College, and they really came up with 14 mindsets from all these other ones, and some of them they see as traits, so they're more like personalities in the sense that they're not as changeable as the skills one that they put forward, and some of them are skills, which is they're very changeable and we can learn it, and they proposed 14. Now that brings us to where we are now with this Entrepreneurship Mindset project that Allan Gray Orbis, as well as in partnership with Kaufman and Gern and MindCette, that Kelly will speak more to. We want to firstly say, well, let's develop a shared understanding of what entrepreneurial mindset means. Let's all agree it means this for us. Then secondly, how do we develop a universal methodology to measure entrepreneurial mindset that can be replicated across 160 GER member countries? And then how do we use an evidence-based approach to teach and develop entrepreneurial mindset, once those first two bases are covered? And that's kind of where we are with this project. I'm sharing the project, and the project then doesn't just look at aspects of the really great, valid research over the years, but it looks at everything that carries weight, puts it together so that we can move forward to try and better understand what mindset is and how to develop it.
Thanks for that, Emmanuel. A small round of applause. This was, of course, a chronological sort of review of the theory and the underpinnings of the project, and sort of trying to share with you that we've really taken our time to sort of dive really deep into arriving at this point before taking it forward. And I'm going to sort of refer to Prof. Kelly Saver just now, who's our academic lead on the project, and he will talk about the process. But like Emmanuel sort of concluded, it is towards getting to a universal understanding and at the same time having a universal instrument that we can use in this community to measure entrepreneurial mindset. So now that we've sort of dealt with the theory and we've got a theory base, the question might be, what does this really mean in practice? What does this mean for me when I go back to my incubator, my accelerator, my own business, my school, my university, or my college? And this is the part that I would want you to sort of keep in the back of your minds, and the type of questions that we would want to construct and fire off at these panel members. Kelly, would you be kind and sort of just share with us, after sort of grinding through this theoretical base, talk to us about this process in terms of getting to the design of the instrument.
Just checking. Always never hurts to check. Okay. As Friedel said, I'm the academic lead for this project. I'm absolutely delighted to be part of it. You'll notice that the very first thing that it starts with, and those of you who heard me before will not be surprised at this, is an operational definition of what entrepreneurial mindset is. So it may not be what you think it is. It is what we are going to measure, and we're going to tell you exactly how we're going to do that so that you can, like it, not like it, but you'll know exactly what it is. There are individual factors to consider. I'm going to try to keep this short so that we can have as much discussion as possible. I'm obviously happy to answer more detailed questions about the nature of the project and the analyses and what's planned for going forward, but I'll just go through this quickly. These are individual factors that need to be considered. In other words, these are items that need to be added. Why should we have yet another test of an entrepreneurial mindset? There are at least a dozen. And if you go to the internet and Google entrepreneurial mindset, have I got it? You're going to find any number of ways that you can be tested to find out whether you have it or not. And one of the things that is very interesting about most of those is they don't ask you two really important questions. They don't ask you, what sex are you? They don't ask you, how old are you? And it turns out that there are interactions between those two variables in the relationship between psychological factors that contribute to the success of starting business. It changes depending on your sex and your age category. So even though we would like to think that people who have an entrepreneurial mindset are all alike, well, there are those cultural differences that matter. So this is an illustration of why we think there should be yet another test. And you'll notice that I've conveniently built this so that everything that I want is in what we're doing and not in many of the other things. You know, you give somebody a microphone, they go crazy, right? You give them slides as well, and you're just out of luck. And these are things that are not in any of them. And these two slides are limited by the number of lines you can get on a PowerPoint and still have people be able to read it. So I've left things out on both. So here's what we have done so far. We have spent months creating questions. We have questions that are coming from 4 different sources. One is published scales that have been shown to be related to entrepreneurial behavior. The second general set is published scales that are reflecting theories, which theories have been related to entrepreneurial behavior, though the scales themselves have not been tested with entrepreneurs. The third is questions that arise from theories without published scales, and that's really part 3A and part 3B, because together, considering the theoretical backgrounds, basically, Emmanuel and I wrote those questions. So right now we have 116 items. That's way too many. We expect that we will be able to cut that down to something in the neighborhood of 75 to 80. And even though that sounds like a lot, if you give a test written to somebody, as you might on an online platform, the average time it takes for somebody to answer is about 7 seconds a question. So 75 questions is not a lot of time. And that's part of our objective, of course, because to any sensible entrepreneur, time is money, and I don't want to waste it. Could we, the last person through, yes, thank you. Shut the door. Great, thank you very much. So I am delighted to pass the mic at this point, and I'm happy. I actually do want to say something that I learned just yesterday, so it's not in the slides. And that's a reason that it is wonderful to be doing this in South Africa as a start. The diversity of languages, the diversity of ethnic backgrounds in South Africa is probably greater than in most of the countries. I'm not used to countries where there are 11 official languages. I don't know how many of you are. Raise your hand if there are 11 official languages in your country and you're not from South Africa. All right, one. Well, then you might want to be next. So when you have to deal with translation and back translation and all of those problems, we're going to be able to solve those problems here before we try to take this thing on the road.
Thank you very much for that, Kelly. We now want to sort of move on to draw some insights from the rest of the panel. And there was a question early on, Johannes, that talked about entrepreneurship education and entrepreneurship education for young people.
Maybe we can put it in the computer.
Can we have this slide up, please? Technical staff. So at this point, may I ask you, over the years and all your work, and given the three hats that you're wearing, Johannes, what would you say is the secret sauce for entrepreneurship education? And let's maybe start at a young age, a primary school level, taking that into high schools, and then also university, which is really an area that you work in all of those. So.
Yeah, it's exactly. We started to work with youngsters when they were 15, and our approach is, when I was doing the last years around 150 speeches per year to teachers, principals, and parents. And I always explain in the beginning, why is entrepreneurship important? And I think it's important to see this, why we are doing this, what we are doing. It's important also what we like to measure, because when you take a look to your motivation, why you think that entrepreneurship needs to be taught, that's a basic background. The first point is always that I explain, we want that everybody has the opportunity to participate in the society. And we are not, a part of them are learning this at home, the most of them are not learning this at home. They are not socialized in that way. This is the social pedagogical oriented approach. The second approach is that we say entrepreneurship has a lot to do with that our society is changing tremendously. The normal family has 1 kid, 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 6 persons who love 1 kid. That's the concept that the kid will not be entrepreneurial normally, because they will do everything for this kid. They will service the kid all around. And with 15, the kid is a perfect consumer. We send the kid very early to the kindergarten or to the soccer games or whatever, that they get social persons. We need also to think how we can increase the self-efficacy. And if the families are not doing this, we have to find places inside our school system, at the education system, very early. And the third reason is, it is an illusion that democracy and economy is getting from one generation to the next one. Each generation has to resettle again the game. We see this at the moment in the field of democracy in a tremendous way, how soft our democracies and are changeable, particularly in some Western European countries, and there is a very large country on the overseas. We're going on some strange phase. When we speak about entrepreneurship education, and maybe we go to the next slide, I always say it's very important that we take a closer look what means entrepreneurship education for us. And we have a so-called TRIO model. The TRIO model is based on the research which we made over 7 years with a very large group. And the coming out was entrepreneurship education needs to cover 3 aspects. The first aspect, and we call it core entrepreneurship. And if it's not inside, it's not entrepreneurship what you are doing. It means that the students, the learners are able to learn that they have ideas. We made a research in several European countries. In the age of 14, 80% of the kids are not believing that they have own ideas. Therefore, it is a particular important focus where you have to take attention when you're working with young kids and they are not good socialized. We're always speaking about this group, which is a very large group. The second aspect is in this core, they need to realize things. And not only one time, they need to do this a lot of time. Therefore, we say a progression is important. Second aspect, the second level is inspiration and empowerment. We are learning so many things, and we have not a lot of passion inside. And I think it's so important. We can learn so much from sports, where kids get so passionate, and we need to do this in the context of entrepreneurship in the same way. And the third one, when we are doing this in the education system, we have to take care that our kids, our students, our learners also take care on the community. Therefore, we call this entrepreneurial civic education, that there are some aspects inside. Because our society needs also a lot of good ideas, but in a democratic system, we need good arguments for our ideas, that we can realize this. It's a bit different in contrast to the market. that's the three aspects. Maybe we'll go, I have one. Sorry.
Johannes, at this point, may I ask you, how did it all start?
We started in an Eastern European country where we were involved during the transformation, and we realized you cannot teach the people business. Because in this time, the businessmen and businesswomen in the country most of them were thieves. They did just steal the state ownership to private ownership, and therefore business had a very, very bad image. And therefore, we started to make entrepreneurship. We said that entrepreneurship is important because you need to build up a new economy in this country. And therefore, we said entrepreneurship is more important for transformation countries than anything else, because you need to change a lot of things. And the class which is rich is normally a class of thieves in these countries. Very often, you just have to take care. It's the same in Austria when you take as it was a transformation, nobilities take over the ownership, and they were just thieves. But the thieves on the privilege that the king gives them, and they could take away the things from someone else. It is something typical for transformation. After this, we also thought that this is something interest for Austria. And therefore, we were doing this in Austria. Inside the European Union, there is existing a working group for entrepreneurship education, where I have the privilege to be a part since 2005. And inside the European Union, education is not a responsibility of the European Union. It's in the ownership of the member states countries. And we are 6 member state countries who are cooperating intensively now to do this work. And later on, I can also say there is a cooperation with 28 member state countries for a quite comparable research element what you are doing. Therefore, I think there are probably quite interesting combinations.
And that's great news. If there's any of the audience participants...
And ST is no more used. It's no more existing.
Right,
it's now called Octopussy.
Oh, right, okay.
It's a new one. It's a new version.
That's useful. If there's any people in the audience that might want to go back to their countries and say, listen, we want to install this in our country, what would you say as practical advice to them? This should be the first 3 steps in terms of getting something like this off the ground, given your experience with starting this in Austria.
If you are doing this you want to do entrepreneurship in an existing syllabus, you have not the opportunity to change the syllabus. The first thing is what I normally do. I try to do an empowerment speech, why entrepreneurship is important, and the why is so particularly important. The people need to see that it's something what they really like to do, and not to say, yes, we are doing it. If they are not feeling that there is a problem which they like to salute, the energy will be not there and not the passion. In the next step, you would speak with the teachers, with the principals, with the students. What did they do inside the school time where they are really thought that they learned entrepreneurship, and which was really cool? And then I normally cluster it to the different levels, and then I realize there are existing some aspects. And then I ask normally the teachers or the principals, how often do you offer this to all of your students? And normally this is not done. It's just one teacher who is doing this, or 2 teachers, they are doing this. And then I need the next step, you have to find some organizational aspects, how you can be able that a lot of learners get in touch with these things. And not only the privileged group who has the privilege to have this teacher or stay with this subject together. I think that's an important approach. Out of this, we worked out so-called challenges, small challenges and large one, because in our country we have 300 syllabuses for upper secondary 2 level. We have some of them, it's quite a lot, and therefore we need to be very flexible, and we have intensive programs, extensive programs, extended programs in different combinations of these challenges, and some of the challenges have the same competences in the backside. Therefore you have different combination if it's a more art-oriented school or is it more social-oriented school.
Sure.
In primary education we are not doing this, but we produce a lot of challenges, and we realize that the teachers there, and it's a very positive message from my point of view, primary education teachers love entrepreneurship when you connect it with self-efficacy. That's the word what you need to use, because they feel that a lot of the kids do not have this competence. And this is a very important thing when you want to go on with entrepreneurship. Because when the kids have not the feeling that they can do something, it's really difficult that they should do something.
Sure.
And maybe we go to the next...
I want to come back to that just now. I want to ask Selim at this point. You mentioned earlier on that for the foundation, it's important to be able to measure entrepreneurial mindset. It's important to measure impact. Can you tell us why that is? Why is it important for the foundation that you want to cover this?
Yeah, actually, Career Entrepreneurship Foundation, as I mentioned before, we've been doing the entrepreneurship education for 5 to 6 years. So we believe that it's a time to the long-term impact of the entrepreneurship education, especially the mindset. Of course, after every programs, we do the kind of satisfaction survey for the participants, but it's only the satisfaction, how much they like the program, on what kind of program they like, and we can just guess how they define the entrepreneurship after and before the program. These are the things we can get from the survey, but it's very short term and it's good for feedback for us because we can get a feedback and then we can modify our program after that. But the thing is, we cannot guess the long-term effect of the entrepreneurship education. So we wanted to participate in many entrepreneurship mindset, especially mindset measurement, although it's a pilot or some long-term projects. Yeah, that's why we want to see that. And we are not a university. We are a foundation, so we cover many range of targets. So we do not focus on the young people, mostly young people though, but the young people have their different backgrounds. They are basically age difference, and some people from the other reason, and some women who sees their careers because of many reasons. These are the targets of our entrepreneurship program. So whenever we do the entrepreneurship measurement, entrepreneurship impact measurement, we have to set the baseline first because all baselines totally different. Their level of entrepreneurship mindset is, as you guess, is very different. So maybe if we participate in these kind of projects, as we mentioned here, I think we should focus on the baseline first because it can be universal. I mean, entrepreneurship mindset can be measured in a universal way, but we believe that in terms of our situations, we have to consider their background and how to. We have to think about how we make the baseline at the same level, and then it's better because it's better for compare the change later. So maybe it just suddenly comes up with my mind that the baseline might be different in our cases.
That's very useful. Thank you. I think I want to now give the audience an opportunity to maybe fire a question or two to the panel based on some of the things we've just covered. And we're going to start with Elaine over here, then that lady, and then Ivan.
Hi, many thanks. Very interesting discussion. A particular question about the instrument. Very interested to hear that. In terms of context to my question, I've got a background. I'm qualified licensed practitioner in a couple of psychometric tools and have done a lot of work on behavioral competency modeling. I also worked for an organization that was developing entrepreneurship skills through youth in the Middle East region. And I had a number of organizations come to me with similar instruments. And what I would find is that if talking to accelerators or incubators, they were very interested in this instrument because they could see how it would save them time, they could see the cost benefits. When we spoke to entrepreneurs, they weren't at all interested in being tested and assessed and said, how can you put me in a box, da-da-da-da. So my question is, how do you see the instrument being used and how may you sell the benefits to an entrepreneur who doesn't want to go through a cycle of testing and evaluation?
Sure. Thanks, Elaine. And that sounds like a question for you and Kelly and Emmanuel. You might want to sort of lend some support. We'll take the other two before we respond.
One.
That'll be the lady just behind there.
Doesn't work.
In your modeling and the way you look at the character traits and the behavioral traits of entrepreneurs, you point out a propensity for risk. Now, a lot of the research has done away with the propensity for risk and replaced it with a tolerance for ambiguity. Does that have a place? And what are the benefits of using propensity for risk or a tolerance for ambiguity?
Thank you very much. And then right at the back there, the gentleman that's now tweeting his question. Ivan?
Okay. Ivan is my name, Chiputra Foundation. I think I just want to, it's not a question, but maybe something for us to highlight about here. Because when we're talking about entrepreneurial mindset research, we need to be careful to define what it is that we want to achieve. Because we can do research to actually differentiate between entrepreneurs and non-entrepreneurs. So considering like, behavioral pattern or something. Or we can also conduct research in order to determine factors required for entrepreneurs to excel or create great ventures, or as probably what the Korea Entrepreneurship Foundation is trying to do is to evaluate the impact of the entrepreneurship education, or finding out maybe the right, approach or intervention model that is that suits best to serve whatever objective is targeted. So I think just to look at entrepreneurial mindset as a whole and start doing questionnaires or research, it's like without clear objective. I think it's just like hitting the bushes and trying to figure out something with numbers and statistics. But at the end of the day, these are not so helpful if we do not define clearly from the beginning what is it that we want to achieve. That's just my take.
That's very useful, Ivan. Yeah, I think you might have missed the last part of Emmanuel's presentation on this. But we're happy to share that with you. Let's get to Elaine's questions straight up. Kelly, Emmanuel, who's going to take that?
I'll hand over to Kelly for the detail.
Is it on?
I'll pass on to Kelly for the detail, the concepts and how to actually build the models and so forth. But I think just a comment on will entrepreneurs be willing to take it is how it's positioned. I feel a lot of surveys and so forth are to try and put people into boxes to say you either are or you aren't. But a key thing for mindset, specifically looking at fixed and growth mindset, is your openness to learning. And a key focus in how this is positioned is to say, how can this give you access to realize that we all have our own blind spots, we all have our own lenses, and this is a way for you to be more self-aware, to be better aware of your environment and better aware of areas that maybe you need to shift your current view in order to create more value. And I think when it's pitched like that, the right entrepreneurs who actually do want to increase the value that they bring will be keen to take it because they're going to be able to learn something, be able to become better entrepreneurs, rather than I'm doing it to say, am I an entrepreneur or do I have a mindset or not? That's not the goal for it.
You have a different view there, Kelly?
I would just extend that. If you look at the number of entrepreneurial companies that are team-based instead of individual-based, if I were the founder of a company and I were about to hire somebody to be a co-founder with me, I would want to know the degree to which our blind spots were the same, the degree to which our strengths were the same. And so I think that if you're talking about trying to pitch it to solo entrepreneurs who intend to stay solo, then I think it's more difficult. On the other hand, if it really is effective in measuring something that is later related to entrepreneurial success, my guess is that whether entrepreneurs are really happy about this or not, investors are going to want them tested. And it's one thing to say, would you like to do this? And it's another thing to say, if you're going to be considered for due diligence here, you need to do this.
Kelly, while you got the mic, the next question dealt with risk versus ambiguity. And
Yes.
You might
Yes. I think you may have missed what I said in my session. And the issue is risk propensity. And of course, there is a difference between the way we perceive risk, the kinds of risk that are being perceived, and our willingness to take a risk of a particular level. And so all of those things are slightly different. Tolerance for ambiguity is also in what we're doing, because it too is important. And I did cover my tail by saying that we didn't put up all 116 items.
Thanks for that. I want to now come back to the earlier question we had about preparing young people. And Johannes, you, of course, in your slide presentation, I'm sure is going to cover the thing that you're most excited about, which is the challenges. Talk us through that, please.
Maybe I also like to add some points to that. In the European Union, we are preparing also a questionnaire. Because there was an intensive discussion, there should be a questionnaire for all European. And honestly to say, the most researchers said this would be not possible. Because just to make some comparable aspects, and I like what Ivan said, it's very important to see what is really the objective, what you want to get out. And when an entrepreneur is using this questionnaire, it probably has a very different orientation in contrast when you like to use it for learners and students. Because you want to research about the impact, which things where you need to go on. And for instance, for employability, we are using in our country 4 different questionnaires. It's a questionnaire for unemployed people. It looks very, very different to the one to pass through university level. Not only in the question of language, also in the question, what does it mean, employability for these different groups? And therefore, I think we need to be very careful because I know a lot of good research questionnaires for entrepreneurial mindset and for character studies, but many of them, they are nice, but the effect, what you can use with them, is highly limited very often. Although they are interesting to see, but it's a complex area, and sometimes I have the feeling we are losing time when you are concentrating too much to think that we find the perfect character sample, which is perfect. And it's very important because I think the objective is the major, for me, impact is very, very good, it's very useful. Orientation for people is useful when you give also advices what should be the next step when you want to change your life, that you are more oriented in that way. And that's really very difficult for questionnaire to do this. Just to come back to the challenges, which I'm really passionate about, we made a reference frame for competences. In my opinion, when you want to do something with learners inside the school, you need to know what you want to do. And particularly when you want to have progressions. This looks now ugly for you, but we have another one in Europe. It's 40 pages fat, and this looks unbelievable. No one will ever take attention to it. Therefore, of course, you will miss some things there. This is the version number 15, but the idea was we want to bring it all on one page, and we were quite successful, in my opinion, because all of these things are in our syllabus now inside. In primary education, in all our 300 different syllabuses. And it's this, on the one hand, it looks like the same like the reference frame. On the other one, it is like the definition of entrepreneurship which we are using, and it's the definition which is used from Harvard, from Babson, or from the European Union. It's a progression-oriented and process-oriented definition. This was the basic, therefore, that we said, okay, we are doing on the 3 levels challenges. And there you see the poster which the most people prefer to see. That's the one for the primary education. But this one is the one for which is the more general one. And there you see, based on research from psychology, of course, we were developing a learning program and which has so-called family categories. And these family categories you find in all levels of competences in different variations. And that's the thing where we think it's a model system where you have different combinations and where you see when your learners have problems in this field, maybe you have to stress more with that and that. That's the way how we are working. If you like to work and use it, it's for free. We have made it for free. You can use it. There's a website where you can take a look on it. It's this one. It's youstart.eu. It's in our ownership, all the things there. And when you are using it, we would be more than interested that you give it back to us, particularly when you translate it to another language, that we can also put it there. At the moment, this is in English and in German, but there will be also French, Portuguese, Bulgarian version existing in Slovenian very soon, but they are still in the translation or in the adaptation version. And I brought a small present for you, because we were in the beginning, we were just talking about that you like Kitzbühel, and I brought a picture for you from Kitzbühel, and I brought a very special one, which no one here in the room will understand. It's this one. It's the Hotel Erika. Yes! Because he was just thinking that's the place where probably of paradise. And we are doing our summer university in this place. Yeah. And that's so cool. Me up. That's so cool. That's so cool.
Now, there's a practical expression so cool. of an entrepreneurial mindset. Somebody's just slipping something in during his presentation that's entirely just for one of the audience members. Right, I think we now have time to be a little bit more interactive and a little bit more engaging. And we're going to allow for more questions from the audience. So we got a couple of hands up here. We're going to do, I think, 3 at a time on this side, 3 at a time on this side. And then we'll get the panel to respond, and then we'll go for the next round with immediate effect. So this would be useful for the mics to move around at this point. All right, the lady at the back, you've got the mic, so let's get you on.
Yes. Hello. Thanks for this presentation. It's really insightful, and it gives another angle on an entrepreneurship study that I hadn't seen in this shape yet. My name is Daria Offman. I'm the gender delegate from Egypt. And all of our work, or 90% of it, is focusing on entrepreneurship education. And I think that the mindset issue is something that we really bump up against every time. And one thing that I always miss in the educational entrepreneurship theory, which also depends on the intention or the what Ivan said earlier, the objective that you have with this research, is not so much focusing on the student, but more on the facilitator or the teacher. Like, what are the internal attributes? What are the factors that really make knowledge click? And in my opinion, it has enormous amounts to do with who is delivering something. Who is the person that's actually facilitating? Because that's the one that's creating a culture that the group then mirrors back always, whether it's a group or a conference or a country or whatever. So what are the... I'm just curious, from your research perspective, if you have something to say about this, or... I would be very curious in another life to really study this, because I'm really fascinated by the dynamics that take place. Thank you.
It's very useful. The question. You got that? Okay, great.
Yeah, for this question, of course, teachers are important. And we made 3 kind of different research in this area. On the one hand, we were looking which kind of teachers, from the perspective from students, were particularly successful in the field of entrepreneurship, and which competences did they have. And we focused to 4 different competence aspects. And they are not connected with knowledge. That's very important. That was something what we realized, therefore it's possible that you can learn entrepreneurship in different subjects. And we are working now with 4 different subjects. We are working with all subjects which are a bit business-oriented, with language teachers, with art and handcraft teachers, and with sport teachers. It sounds a bit strange that we are working with sport teachers, but these are the different competences where we see that you can foster in the different aspects. I agree with you. That's particularly important when you want to have a whole organization as an entrepreneurial organization. In my opinion, you have to take care on entrepreneurship education in 3 aspects. The first is the learning arrangement, what you want to foster. The other one is the organizational development aspect, because how you get more space inside these elements and in this area. And the third one is which resources do you need for the teachers, and which kind of and of course, when we speak about teachers, it does not mean that we are not involving stakeholders, entrepreneurs, and you have the idea how you can involve them. It's a very important thing to involve them, but it's unrealistic that entrepreneurs take over the whole teaching process for all students. We have this on some universities, but you find some very often 2 aspects. They are very subjective. And therefore you have to find, on universities you can offer this because you have very large classes and the things are running different. We have a program like this in the Technical University in Vienna. It's called MyBiz, and there are only entrepreneurs who are teaching, and a moderator has the really very difficult to give structure, and it's yeah. And I think it's always the same. It's difficult.
Thanks, Johannes. We're going to try and take a couple of questions before we respond. Ernest, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ernest Boatin from the South African Institute for Entrepreneurship. Should I say that has been our main focus for the last 21 years. We breathe and eat entrepreneurial mindset. We have entrepreneurship programs and the mindset programs in schools for the last 21 years. And that's what excites me when you said that you got a similar program within the European Union region. But I'm just curious to know, because in your presentation, it didn't come out clearly, number one, as to, from operational side, how you've managed to actually introduce the program in schools. Is it seen as an extracurricular, or is it within the curriculum? Number one, and then number two is how have you managed to actually overcome the red tape of should I say the educational departments within the various countries within the EU region? For example, in South Africa. What we do is that in order to get to schools, you obviously have to drive it through the district departments of education in order to get access. Even if the principals agree, you got to drive it through that section. Our programs are curriculum aligned, so we believe that the best way is actually to actually train and groom a whole range of educators who actually understand and perhaps even also manage and develop to the point of having an entrepreneurial mindset, but be in the position to transfer knowledge and skills using friendlier and simulation-based methodologies for the benefit of the youth. What I want to find out is how have you managed to measure impact since you introduced your programs? And then my third question goes to should I say, Mr. Shiva Kelly? Yeah. In your presentation, I saw something like you haven't actually earmarked undergraduates, university undergraduates who are actually pursuing entrepreneurship programs for your pilot study. And I was just wondering whether, depending on the objectives you had in mind, and I think there was a question that came on earlier on, that just merely doing entrepreneurial study, mindset study is one thing, but having a specific objective in mind is something else, because it helps one to really focus on what they want at the end of the day. I'm just wondering why you decided to actually consider undergraduate students pursuing entrepreneurship program for your pilot study instead of, let's say, the actual practitioners. And here I mean entrepreneurs. Sure. I'm just wondering whether it was a way of actually helping you to frame your questions better. I don't know. But because, I mean, if it's about entrepreneurial mindset, you rather deal with those who are at the cold front as opposed to someone who is just reading entrepreneurship as an academic study. It's a different thing altogether.
Yeah,
thank you.
I really do need to answer that.
So Kelly,
one.
we're gonna go back and
no, I really need to answer that one before it, so it doesn't hang out there. We did a pilot study in South Africa involving another company that did it on mobile devices, and the results from that were, shall we say, problematic. And in order to see just how problematic they were, I tested my Psych of Entrepreneurship class and discovered that these third and fourth year entrepreneurship students were less entrepreneurial than the pilot study respondents were, which gave me still less confidence in that particular pilot study, which is why we're doing a second one. And I just didn't take that out of the slides.
All right, thanks for that. We'll get back to the other three questions you had there. And let me just recap. So curriculum placement, whether this is extracurricular or inside the group, the red tape, how do they get rid of the red tape in terms of governance, and then the measurement of impact. Did I capture that correctly? And then Ernest did some marketing. We're going to get to the lady in the middle here, please. You're going to be next. I've got your first question, remember.
Okay. So my question is around business, because there's a lot of entrepreneurship programs right now. And so I'm interested in the research in terms of entrepreneurial mindset within an existing culture of an established business. How do you create an entrepreneurial mindset, whether it's in the unit, whether it's in the company, so that entrepreneurs can actually function?
Sure. And then the lady here in the front that was being ignored the whole time.
Do you know the research from Johannesburg?
The mic is coming.
I think he made these nice.
So it's just a simple question to the lady. I have a similar academy to what you're doing. We're actually giving entrepreneurship programs to really young students from the ages of 8 to 14 years old. I really want to ask about the ages you're working with and what are the methods you're using in your entrepreneurship programs.
All right, so let's deal with that first set of questions from the left-hand side of the room then. Johannes, would you address the issue of curriculum placement?
Yeah, I can answer the first question. In my opinion, when you are doing an extracurricular activity outside the regular parts, you normally get only the good socialized students. The other one, maybe you will not get. In our system, we have the privileged situation that it's all inside the syllabus now. But it was not 15 years before. It was not the same way. Therefore, you have to begin with an interpretation. And 2006, I got this position at our ministry. It was the reason that they asked me, where we were doing most entrepreneurship, that I should make a step inside the institution. I'm not a member of the ministry, but I'm the coordinator for all coordinators which we have, and we have 18 of them, and they are members of the ministry. And that was a privileged situation, because it was the situation that I'm now inside the structure. And when I'm inside the structure, I have another conversation possibility with a lot of colleagues inside the ministry. And they are normally very open. They do not like to be criticized. Therefore, you need to be a diplomat. I got 2011 the Ashoka Fellowship because I was the diplomat in changing the system. But I think it's very important that you know how you have to work inside your systems, and probably the systems are working different in the countries. And in some countries, maybe you can do things in a very, very different way. In our one, you need to be very diplomatic. And then you can reach all and everything. Therefore, I would prefer it's not extracurricular, but it doesn't mean that there are existing maybe very cool programs for weekend, for summer holidays, or things like this. There are also existing very nice approaches for that. But when you want to reach all students, all learners, you have to go inside the regular syllabus. It's a very cool question how we measure the impact. And we have changed this several times. In the beginning, we had a testing, a multiple choice testing, which I still like. It has 3 aspects. It was never published. It was on the internal used, but we used it for 3 million youngsters over the years. We have quite a lot of data. They were all in ownership of the ministry, and our ministry is normally never publishing research. because they say they want to change things when they are not okay, and they are not willing to publish things when they are not okay. And there were 2 psychology testing and 1 competence-oriented testing. But there were some parameters in the backside which we realized later they were wrong. And it's very difficult because when you make a questionnaire which is useful for different age groups, and you have a parameter in backside, for instance, you're willing to start up a company, for students when they are 14, that's a stupid question. But for the 25-year-old students at the university, it's a good question. Therefore, it's difficult to think about this. We have now an impact study which is based on Octopussy. It's the second version from AST. In one aspect, it's a quantitative thing. It's not working that well, but it's working okay. And we have a large qualitative research. We are making interviews with the kids, with the parents, with the teachers, with the principals. And therefore we have a lot of data and a lot of good feedback, particularly in primary education. It's all qualitative. In secondary 1 and secondary 2, it's also quantitative or a lot of quantitative. It's made in 6 different countries. Therefore, we have a lot of data and comparable and see how the things are different. And it's not that easy to make it in the same way that it's working in all cultures in the same way.
Johannes, then Ernest also asked about bureaucracy or red tape and the specific experience from South Africa. Kelly earlier on said it's better to ask.
Maybe I want to say one thing. What we are also using for impact is competitions.
Yeah.
When you are doing competitions, this could be also an aspect for. We are using the competitions for research because we have one competition which is very large for our country. It's an idea competition where the youngsters have to make a small business model. It's not the Osterwalder one, it's a smaller one. And we see how the kids are developing over the years. And also the teachers are developing. It's one aspect just, but it's something where we see there is something going on. And the business models, some of them are really scalable, they are sustainable, values are very important for us. That's a nice thing where you also see an impact, there's something going on, something positive going on.
Sure. So Kelly's advice on bureaucracy early on was it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. But what was your experience with red tape or bureaucracy when you implemented? And that's also answering what Ernest was after. Yeah.
I think it's... bureaucracy, oh God. I'm not a fan of ministries, but...
you want me to answer for you? You don't get into trouble.
I think there's no other Austrian here. Or how many Europeans are here? It's a small number that way. I think the ministries normally say, we're all doing this. It's all done. We have it. It's working. Perfect. I think it's the same answer which you get in all countries. And when you take a look, there was made a study about entrepreneurship education at schools in Europe 2012. Another one 2016. You can download it. It's an official paper. The 2016 one is a very good one. The 2012 was a very problematic one because there was not enough evaluation from side of the Commission inside. Because some countries were written things which maybe 1% of the kids were doing, and when you were reading the report, it looked like all of them are going through this. It's the same with the universities. Take a look to the most universities. There is a research made, which is called Entrepreneurship Education at universities in Europe. The average university is reaching 2% of the students with an entrepreneurship program. Maybe in bachelor, the most in master. The most of the universities are not offering really sensibility programs. And where they are doing this? Not at the technical universities. Oh, no, they are going particularly to business schools. They are awaiting the entrepreneurs for the future. Probably not. I think that's a very important thing where we have to take care. Very often we think that we have solutions. Partly, of course, they are existing, but they are not in majorities existing. And therefore, we need to be very careful when ministry people say that all is done, because they like to be, particular politicians from the ministry, they have an election, they like to win again. And I think it's an important thing where we have to take care.
All right, so the lady in the middle here spoke about entrepreneurial mindset in a corporate, in internal, in a business. You might recall in my introduction, I referenced definitions by Timmons and Spinelli that talks about entrepreneurship is a way of thinking That's opportunity obsessed, holistic in its approach, leadership balance for the purpose of value creation and capture. And that part there is really the type of employees that you would want in your business. Can you add value? And similar to the example of the sweeper at NASA, who was asked, what is it that you do? So I put a man on the moon, because if it's not clean here, we can have malfunction with dust particles when we send somebody up. So that particular mindset, and I'll get back to you now,
there is, when you are interested in this, Google Wunderer. 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 It's a Swiss professor. He's no more professor. He's retired, but he made 25-year research about. And he did not call it entrepreneur, because entrepreneur in some European country has not a good sound. Because there was a French professor who made it a very negative definition about this. So therefore, it's a bit problematic. I'm not using it anymore too. We are using now another word for it. But it's because this, okay. And Wunderer made research, and based on this, he developed an entrepreneurial personal development. How you can make that your company stays entrepreneurial although you are growing and you're increasing, have a larger number of entrepreneurs, employees in your company. It's a very nice and useful instrument. And he's from the University of St. Gallen, and they have their own institute for that. I can highly recommend this. And I'm sure you find a lot of things in English too, because he has a lot of students and professors brought out of his school. It's a very, very, very cool professor. A very cool things which are coming out. I can highly appreciate and take a look to this.
Wunderland.
Wunderer.
Wunderland.
Maybe I will type it inside somewhere. Maybe I will do this. I will write it down and you see it. Yeah?
And share it with us. Yeah. The people are already there. Exactly. Yeah. Sure.
So I want to know, what is the research? Finished, thank you.
And the mic arrives afterwards. So we're going to come back to that. Emmanuel, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so I'll take one research and apply it to a current company that has employees that wants to be more entrepreneurial. So there's research by Haney and Shepard on metacognitive awareness. And it's really, it's a practice that you need to form as an individual to be able to shift your mindset. So the way in which to do that is to be able to say, firstly, I need to be aware of my environment. Well, actually, let me take a step back. Firstly, I need to understand what we mean by entrepreneurial mindset. Then I need to be aware of myself and where I sit in relation to that definition that we formed. And then I need to be aware of the environment that I'm operating in and how that environment is conducive or not conducive to that. And then you need to be able to change the environment as well as change yourself. But now that's an individual approach that they put forward. How do you bring that into a business? Well, the business needs to do the same thing. I think it's very much like your values. The business says, these are our 5 values are on the wall. Are they actually operating in each individual in the business? Mostly not. So how do we firstly assess our business against our understanding of entrepreneurial mindset? Are we an environment that is fostering our understanding that we now know? And how do we do that better? And then secondly, how do we make our staff aware as to where they sit in relation to where they need to get to, and how do we create ways to get there? And a last little caveat is that for some companies, entrepreneurial mindset might not be good for their current vision. If their vision is stability and consistency, and that's the way they're structured, they might need a different mindset in order to look at their success. So you really have to understand it first, and then create an environment to create a method for self-awareness and that change.
That satisfy you? We're going to now give this part of the room an opportunity. So can we get the mics over on this side? And then for the benefit of both you, Ernest has left the room, and Ivan, we've put the slide up to talk to the purpose of the research in the study. Yes, please.
Just a response to your question, if we may. We missed out one question here.
That is
just on
of impact for Simile, yes, of course.
To answer her question, Yes, we are doing many programs for age 8 to 40. Is that your question, right? The children age 14. Yeah. Let me introduce some programs. Our foundation doing. First of all, we think that individual mindset is important, but it is also important that the community, the environment. In Korea, we think that the parents' decision and parents' mindset is very it has big impact to the children. So we invite all family members to the camp for a day, and then we have programs like some programs that they participate in the programs, but it doesn't seem like the entrepreneurship something. It's just normal things that they can hang around and then they can make something. And after that, we ask them, the family members, find the problems in your family members. Maybe it can be very small things, but the parents doesn't conscious of. But the children may understand that it is very serious problem in my house. So, and then we ask them to make some business plan to solve these kind of problems. And these kind of things we think they're very effective for the children aged 4 to 14 because mindset for them is nothing special. It's just they're very vulnerable. So it is easy to change their mindset. So, and we also can change their parents' mindsets so that we don't know the impact yet, but just output, let's say output, just short term, it was so good. So far, it was so good. They are so satisfactory, and they could conversate each other. And the parents came to understand what the entrepreneurship is and why it's good for their children and why it's good for their children's future and future growth. These are the things we do. And then we also made some game tools like some board games or card games for the young people because we can use a textbook when we teach the facilitator or professors because they need theory. They need some toolkits to teach their students. But when it comes to the children, young kids, we need some games so that they can involve in the program easily, and then they can unconsciously understand what the entrepreneurship is, what the risk-taking is, and then what the leadership and fellowship is. It's very natural process they can understand entrepreneurship. And the last thing I can introduce is we search for some historic person in Korea. We studied the Korea history, and then we found out what the entrepreneurship, the Korean type entrepreneurship in the future, because the word entrepreneurship in Korea is very difficult to understand because entrepreneurship is in English, right? It comes from some Western countries, but when we translate it in Korean, it is not easy to understand what entrepreneurship is exactly because we use Chinese letters and we also translate from Japanese words, so it is very confused. So we don't want to teach them like it is entrepreneurship. What is entrepreneurship about? Because it makes a lot of confusion. So we just brought one person from our history and show them this person is very entrepreneur person because although he or she was not a businessman or businesswoman, for example, he or she developed some Korean letters. We think that that's very entrepreneur behavior and entrepreneur mindset. They develop something and they change their community things. It's very easy approach for the children from their age 8 to 14. So these are what we are doing. And after these kind of program, maybe we can just ask them, how do you define entrepreneurship and what are you going to say to your friends about the entrepreneurship? These things are, so far we are doing about the mindset change evaluations.
All right, thanks. Thank you very much for that, Selim. And again, it comes back to the issue of value add. Irrespective of whether I'm running a business or not, it's what value do I add to society, to my community? We're going to now go to the right-hand side of the room. This lady's ready here. Yes, please.
Thanks. Yes, thank you for a very interesting discussion. I'm Leonie Baldacchino. I'm from the University of Malta, and one of the many areas in which I work, all related to entrepreneurship, is I've been trying for many, many years to foster the entrepreneurial mindset in my country at various levels, not only at the university level, but also kids in primary and secondary school. And I was very pleased that a few years ago our government changed the national curriculum to now include entrepreneurship education as a cross-curricular theme, which essentially means that it is now the duty of all teachers to embed entrepreneurship in all subjects, which is great in theory, but we are now facing challenges in actually implementing this, because there is some resistance from teachers, including from the Union of Teachers, because this is kind of being viewed as an add-on for them. But even for those teachers who are willing, because there is a growing number of teachers who are willing, they obviously lack the skills because they haven't been trained and, well, they're not entrepreneurs. I was just wondering if you have any experience or insight that you can share with me on this issue, please. Thank you.
Sure, that's very kind. Then we'll take the gentleman.
So thank you very much. Very fascinating discussion. My name is Jens, and I work for something called the International Labour Organization, the ILO. And to those of you who don't know what the ILO is, we are the oldest UN agency, formed in 1919. We'll be 100 years old in 2 years' time. And we're the only tripartite UN agency, meaning that government, organized business, and organized labor is part of the ILO. Now, for the past 20 years, the ILO has been doing exactly this. We've been supporting entrepreneurship education in more than 50 countries. We have been supporting secondary schools, secondary education systems, vocational training systems, and universities to roll out what we call experiential entrepreneurship education. So building on the whole experiential learning cycle, where you need to do something and get your hands dirty and share lessons learned and experiences, and then you apply that learning to the real world. And I think, and I want to just reflect on this and then ask you a question, and I think if you look at modern education, or if you look at the whole education system, it was formed around the Industrial Revolution in the 1870s, and the purpose of education was really to educate workers to work in a certain profession and in a certain industry. And I think what we see these days, the world is changing. The future of work challenges, the future of society challenges are so insurmountable if we don't change how we prepare our children for the future of work, where we know that formal employment opportunities are not going to be there. You know, we need to create entrepreneurship as a mindset, as a life skill, as a set of life skills and competencies that anyone, regardless of whether you're going to start a for-profit business or whether you're going to contribute to solve society's challenges and problems by being social entrepreneurs, I think we need to have a fundamental new way of thinking about how we educate our children for the future. Now, my question is, and how do you do this? And this is what I'd like to ask the panel, because what we learn is that you don't, and this is based on introducing entrepreneurship also in South Africa over the past 3 years in 62 secondary schools in the Free State with 17,000 learners. And we have a study, quasi-experimental study we can share with you that can feed into the work you're doing. What we learn is that you don't teach or learn about entrepreneurship from a textbook. You need to play games. So what we have done in South Africa, we've adapted the curriculum assessment policy statement, something called the CAPS, that outlines the syllabus for all education levels. We've looked at grade 10, 11, and 12, and we've taken everything, kept it as it is, bearing in mind that you only had 2 hours of entrepreneurship being taught in 3 hours of education, 2 hours of entrepreneurship. Everything else was about how to make a profit and loss statement, how to do your cash flow analysis, nothing about entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship is very different from business management skills. So what we've done is we've adopted the whole syllabus and we've made it into games. So what learners do now, they play an entrepreneurship education game, they get their hands dirty, they learn about risk-taking by playing a game on risk-taking, and then they debrief on the lessons learned and why did you do like this and why did you do like that, and then they apply that learning to the real world. So my question, and we've done that, and this has been embedded in the curriculum, not extracurriculum. So my question to you up there is, isn't that the way we should be going? You know, having a more experiential approach to entrepreneurship education. Forget about all the textbooks. Get a lot of games into the class and have young children play the games, because that's when they get excited. And last comment, and you work in education, and those of you who work in education know about the sort of the Bloom's taxonomy of higher order and lower order thinking skills. And the lower order thinking skills about comprehension of a subject and being able to, regurgitate knowledge is what is being taught in the South African education system, and across Africa, which is a post-colonial or actually a colonial education system. But what entrepreneurs need are higher order thinking skills, being able to evaluate and synthesize information and so on and so forth. So that's my question to you.
So you're asking if we need to include experiential methods?
Exactly, and how to do that, and whether that's also what you're doing in the European system.
All right.
Sorry, that was a long comment question.
We're going to have to close it off, I'm afraid, in terms of the questions.
Sorry
I'm going to let the panel respond to those and then some closing remarks. Johannes?
Okay, maybe I'll start first with the colleague from Malta.
Malta, yes, please. Yeah.
Transversal skills it's the word what we are using in Europe, and what we are doing is transversal skills promotion. That's the thing what we are doing. Although I like still that there are existing own subjects too. We have in our country we have 40 schools. We have only 550 schools in upper secondary, and 40 have their own subject entrepreneurship. But this is only experimental learning. It's 6 hours, which is quite a lot. I'm very interested to talk with you, Jens, because we are doing something in South Africa, and you said to me there's nothing in syllabus. Therefore, I would like to know which syllabus you are using. I think that games is a very, very interesting aspect, and I would also like to know which kind of games you are using, because experimental learning, we are using a lot of experimental learning. I think experimental learning, I like it a lot. I know your board games, I like them too. I would like to translate them, but it's quite a challenge to translate from South Korean. I think it's important that we share these games when we have them, because it's not important that we are cycling, invent the cycle again. Therefore, I think games, experimental learning. I think entrepreneurship is an experimental learning approach in general, normally.
Experiential, yeah.
Experimental.
Yeah, that was experiential, yeah. That's what he was referring to.
Sounds similar for me.
Certainly not the same thing. Prof. Kalisaver, share us your thoughts on the way forward.
Wow. I would like to respond to Ivan's issues about what is the objective. And I believe that, well, I'm actually not going to try to speak for the AGOF, but I know what my objective is. My objective is to develop the best single measure of entrepreneurial mindset there is. Now, what people want to do with that, whether they want to use it as a post-test in an educational system, whether they want to use it to train entrepreneurs, whether they want to use it, whether investors want to use it to select teams that they back, whether entrepreneurs want to use it to pick people who will fill out their companies well. I regard all of those uses to be beyond my responsibility. My responsibility ends when I hope, help to produce the best single measure there is.
Selim, where through from here for you?
Yeah. But let me answer. Let me add some questions. Maybe I don't know the question from who, but in situation in Korea, we also have a similar situation. The curriculum of the entrepreneurship, because the Korean government initiated the project. The entrepreneurship education yet is not in the official curriculum, but they want to embed into the curriculum. But the thing is, as others said, how can we embed it into curriculum? So there are many ministries that work together, but it just initiated, so not many readers yet. But in this kind of process, the organizations like KEF we have an experience, so we can advise them, and then we can suggest the tools and modules, or how can we promote entrepreneurship educations in the curriculum. Because we don't believe that the entrepreneurship, it will not be on title like entrepreneurship education. It will be embedded into the current existing curriculum, like sociologies or mathematics kind of things. So how can we embed it into that? So I thought it's kind of just only concern of Korea, but I think there are many countries, and that the countries already gone through this kind of process. So maybe in this kind of process, we can work together. And because of these kind of things, we've done a lot of researches, and then we found that entrepreneurship education, the teachers are very important. In Korea, we have a group of schools, high schools and middle schools that targeted that is specialized in entrepreneurship education. We do not say there is entrepreneurship schools, but there's a special curriculum, special programs for them that was supported by the Korean government. They can learn the skills or attitudes of entrepreneurship, but there is many outcomes, but it should be more extensive way, the whole nationwide project. So we need to raise more facilitators first, because this is also what we do now. The facilitators are so important. So when it comes to training them, theory and methodologies already existed, and we have books and materials. But the thing is, we ask them to what they do in class. We ask them actually what they do in the class, because entrepreneurship education is not about the theory, it's about the practical or experimental things. So we ask them whatever the program you want to do, you just do it yourself, and then do with your peers, so that they can understand it will be impact. It will have impact or not. So I think these are it takes some time and it costs a lot, but it's very necessary.
That's very kind. Thank you, Seelam. Emmanuel, I'm going to have to give you 1 minute to wrap up. Where to from here?
You can speak to the specific project where to, which is up on the screen. But I think a where to for everybody is there's really 3 approaches. The first one is to actually let's understand what we mean by entrepreneurial mindset. Let's not use it fleetingly as a buzzword, but actually understand what it means in relation to skills and competencies and other aspects of learning. And then secondly, there's kind of 2 approaches. The first approach is taking the as-is systems, which have been ingrained for 50, 60, 80 years, and trying to change them, which is hugely difficult. And we may need to settle for a next best approach of complementing what's already there and trying to do it. But how do we go back to the roots of education? How do we start impacting teachers who are training now? How do we start impacting young people who are acquiring the values and the lenses that they see the world through now, and embedding habits and ways of seeing the world that actually in 20 years' time is going to be the norm? And we need to take a balanced approach, but impacting on both.
Lovely. Ladies and gentlemen, on that note, I want to thank the panel members for their insights and wisdom. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Thank you for taking the time to come and listen to our session, and thank you very much for your contributions, and thank you for your questions. Enjoy the rest of the Congress.